Hey everybody, I'm Josh Jones. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Tech Recruiting Intensive, Proven Tactics for Hiring Software Engineers. I'm joined by Mikey Weil, Erin Mathew, Reginald Mason, and David Marr. Unfortunately, Marc Hamel is out sick and he's unable to join us, but he's with us in spirit or with the force. And he'll be joining us in Seattle in June for Talent 42. So he's not here today, but if you're going to join us at that conference, that'll give you an opportunity to catch up with him there in person. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our friends over at CoderPad for making today's webinar possible. CoderPad works with talent acquisition practitioners, hiring managers, and generally great companies hiring developers. They empower teams around the world to screen and interview engineers with gamified assessments, take-home projects, and live paired programming interviews. There's a chat feature located on the right-hand side of your screen. This is meant to be an interactive webinar, so use that chat feature. It's good for general discussion. If you've got questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A tab. For our panelists, you are not required to use the Q&A tab. If you've got questions for each other, please ask. If things don't make sense, be like, hey, that's not how I would have done that. Mikey's going to be leading this panel. He's going to be our moderator. But of course, if you've got questions for each other, please bring it. In a few minutes, I will drop the HRCI code and SHRM codes into the chat so that you have them. Today's webinar is being recorded, and by the end of the day today, you will receive a link to the recording. Our panelists today have been generous enough to create a really great resource for everyone. So get your cameras out or your phones out or whatever you need to do. Scan that QR code because that's going to take you to this mind-blowing tech recruiting resource that's been prepared for you today. But don't get lost in it now. Pay attention to the content. You can go back to it. But go ahead and open that, bookmark it, do whatever you need to do. And yeah, that way you'll have it. So like I said, Mikey is going to be moderating this panel. I'm going to turn off my mic and turn off my camera, but I'll be watching the chat in the background. Gang, if you need me, I'm here. Just holler. Mikey, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Perfect. Thank you to Joshua for putting this all together. Thank you to ERE. Thank you to our audience member here, also CoderPad, our sponsor. Yeah, this is very exciting. I've worked very closely with two of the panels here, and then the other one has been a mentor to me throughout my sourcing career. So I'm very excited to be here. I don't have a ton of tech sourcing background, so I'm more moderating this, and I will be learning just as much as everybody in the audience, which is super exciting. So we came up with a bunch of questions I'll be asking the panel. They're questions that we all kind of felt people are going to want to ask anyway. At the end, we'll probably stop around 2:50, see if you guys have any other questions that haven't been asked. But like Josh said too, feel free to put anything in the public as well. I'm going to be keeping an eye more on the presenters chat, talking with the three wonderful presenters here. David Marr is kind of more running the public. And before I have everybody introduce themselves, the picture that you just saw up there with the QR code, we will show that again at the end. You don't need a QR app like you did like 6 years ago. So just pull out your camera on your phone, take a picture, it will pull up. And as always, the video recording from this webinar will be sent out after. So we're going to just go around, everybody introduce themselves. Erin, do you want to kick it off? Oh, you're on mute.
Of course, I would stay muted when I'm not supposed to. Anyways, so I am Erin Mathew. I am a senior talent sourcer over at PayPal. So been in the fintech space for about a year now. So I do a lot of technology roles. So full stack, front end, back end, DevOps, pretty much all of it. And that's what I've been doing most of for about the last 3 or 4 years. So excited to share what I've learned along the way.
Thank you, Reginald. Yeah, you want to kick it off?
What's going on, guys? Reggie Mason here. I'm juiced to be on this panel. I've looked up to these guys and have learned a ton from each of these guys over the years, which has been awesome. I've been a tech recruiter / sourcer for the last 13 years. Worked on everything from pretty much every part of the SDLC to even some non-technical roles. So I'm excited to hop into this with these guys, and it's going to be fun.
I'm David Marr. I've been in the tech recruiting space for, 15 plus years, probably closer to 20 or over 20 actually. And I have recruited for just about every facet of technology that you can think of, and have done most recently a lot of software engineering, full stack, back end, front end, a little bit of DevOps, some product managers, TPMs, engineering leaders, directors of engineering, most recently. And I'm happy to be here and love the space and love helping share knowledge.
Cool. Thank you to everyone. And yeah, I guess my background, I've been in sourcing about 11 years now. I always tell people I struggled to find a job for 2 years out of college and then found my way into sourcing. So I love helping other people. Definitely connect with us on LinkedIn. I post a bunch of tips and tricks. If you are a job seeker, David Marr, every couple days, even more frequent than that, has been posting a ton of TA job postings. So if you're a sourcer, if you're a recruiter and you're looking for something, definitely check out his posts. He also sends them out in an email as well. So it's a really good collection. It's definitely helped some people. So check that out. If you're not looking, send it to somebody else who you know is looking, because we all know plenty of people who are, trying to find something right now. But yeah, I've been doing it for 11 years as of this month, and currently just boomeranged back to a previous employer in the pharma space. So while these lovely people are more tech, my background's pretty much manufacturing, almost all the way through. So small town guy from New Hampshire. I like working with manufacturing, and that's kind of the thing that I dig. So like I said, we're going to just ask some very basic questions here. Just kind of going to ask the panel. And the thing is, this is all kind of tip of the iceberg, kind of eagle eye view of what you're going to hear. Of course, everybody has different things at different companies, different experience, but you're going to hear some great things from these people. And yeah, no real specific order. We just have some great questions here. And like I said, I know David will be checking out the public. I'll be doing the same a little bit as well. So if you don't hear a question towards the end and you have something you really want us to answer, let us know and I can answer that. But to kick it off here, even though it's a weird labor market, of course, right now, and, a lot of tech companies are kind of going through some struggles, which we know. The thing is tech companies are always hiring. They're always hiring, whether they're startups, whether they're, the biggest companies in the world, they're always hiring. So I'm sure some of you have worked at both of those, startups and large companies. You've worked in anything with the word tech after, fintech, biotech. There's everything with the word tech after. But from what you have seen, how can companies differentiate themselves from competitors in the recruiting efforts, and how can they kind of stand out against competitors to find top talent? Who wants to kick this one off?
I'll get it going here.
You're on mute, David, just so you know. Yeah, go right ahead, Reggie.
So I have to correct you, Mikey. Social media does not have tech in it. Okay, so just so you know. No, when we talk about differentiation, I think the first thing that jumps out to me is clarity. Clarity from a job description standpoint and the actual deliverables that someone needs to bring to the table. There can be a lot of ambiguity when it comes to, well, what does this company actually need? What kind of impact can I make? People who do a great job of just spitting it out in plain English, not trying to be too fancy, in my opinion, it prevents some of the decision fatigue of, should I even explore this?
Yeah, what I was trying to say is I think that whether you're a small company or a large company, the general process is similar. And I think you got to start off with what your company is about, making sure that people know what the mission is and what types of problems you're trying to solve and products and services and so forth. From there, then talk about, if you're talking about a job posting, talk about the team that the role is part of, what the purpose and function of the team is, and then kind of what the role is and how that role fits in. I do also think it's important to talk about things that your company does and give like specific facts and figures, because engineers love data and they like to know what they like to have understanding. So it's going to allow you to have a lot more better informed conversations with the candidates that you're exploring for your jobs, but also allows you to communicate, things like company culture, expectations, what it looks like to be successful in the role, what it looks like in 30 days in the role, 60 days in the role, and so forth. And this will also allow people that are interested and resonate with your message to opt in by applying. And also the same token, people that are not interested in that opt out.
Yeah, and I think that something really important that a lot of recruiters don't always consider, to position themselves to candidates that they're talking to, is really understanding where your company is with the projects that they're working on. I've talked to a lot of engineers out there, and some of them really either prefer to work in a maintenance environment or an environment where they're building out a lot of brand new applications. There's definitely some people out there that hate working in a maintenance environment. They hate just maintaining the current applications that they have. And then there's people that just want the excitement of building and rolling out something new. So knowing which one of those your team is at is really crucial right as you're reaching out to people.
Thank you. And something I'm just going to do kind of at the end of these, if I'll throw in some of my own kind of 2 cents or kind of go off of things. Reggie talked about, give it the basic, people try to get creative with job titles. People try to get creative with job descriptions. If you have a back-end engineer, don't call it something like unicorn strategist of tech, because nobody's going to be looking for that. So if you call it back-end engineer, you're probably getting buried in some other people who are posting the same jobs, but just call it that, call it what it is. That's the best way to do it. David talked about giving them the facts. Not every state legally has to put the salary on their job description at this time. If you are lucky to work in one of those, maybe put the job link in your first outreach or talk about salary in your first outreach if you can. I know how tricky and taboo that can be, but if you can give that right up front, that's kind of the best thing to do. And off of that, Erin talked about projects. Tech people want to know what their projects are going to be. Not that they're going to be a back-end engineer. That can mean a bunch of different things. So I think, there was a study about what are the top 5 things tech people want to know in the outreach. And it's usually location, what's the salary, what's the project they're working on, maybe upward mobility and kind of seniority of the role. So that's definitely some great things to kind of work off of.
And as Erin alluded to, engineers, there's engineers that like to work on like existing systems and do like the maintenance side. But there's a lot of the engineers that startup companies and, the FANG type organizations you're going to be hiring for are going to be people that are wanting to work on, modern or bleeding edge tech stacks. So understanding the tech stack that the engineers will be working within and being able to articulate that to them, I think is something that is extremely important to understand. And you don't have to be technical to understand it. You can partner with your hiring manager or even engineers that are on the team that's part of, and they can give you and explain it to you like you're 5. And just wanted to point that out because I think it's very important, and because sometimes people try to target people that are interested in maintenance or one bleeding edge, and you don't have that in your environment. So
and just kind of piggybacking on that, attractive attributes, oftentimes if you're working with a smaller organization that can't compete with maybe an at-scale company that can give a candidate exposure to much more data, much more bells and whistles, being able to talk about attributes that might be advantageous, like the amount of autonomy or scope of ownership within the organization, can be an awesome kind of differentiating factor there too.
Thank you. And I want to point out too, David used the word FANG. If any of you, not everybody here is obviously from tech. You're here to kind of learn about tech. FANG is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. or Facebook or Meta, if you want to call it main, you can do that too. We're at least calling it Fang. That's kind of the way to call it. Yeah, and basically you're going to hear a lot of hiring managers want to hire people from Fang. When people are talking about tech and success, it's always Fang. So if you do hear that, now you'll know what that means, F-A-A-N-G. But definitely, like Erin just alluded to, if you can steer hiring managers away from only wanting to hire from those companies, that's also a good thing too. Another thing too you'll want to put in your first outreach to software engineers is the tech stack they're going to be using. That's the biggest thing. Is it Java, Ruby on Rails, C++? What's it going to be? They also want to know that because they might not have that knowledge or might not be interested in the tech stack that you're working with. So to jump into the next question here, I already know who I'm going to ask first about this. So as far as non-traditional channels or methods that you use to find talent in the past, we all know GitHub is kind of the mother of finding tech talent and also getting emails pretty easily, last I remember. LinkedIn can be good. Indeed can be good for tech talent, but they're, not always the best places. I always like to look at About Me. That's a great way to find tech talent. Most web developers have made their own resume, profile, all of that. But to kind of go around and to start off with Erin, what have you used to find tech talent out of the ordinary before?
So anybody that's ever watched a webinar that I've been on knows that I won't shut up about recruiting on Reddit. So that's definitely a really great place to find tech talent. And really the reason that I started looking there was because I started looking for what some of the overlapping websites are that are frequently visited by the same users as GitHub. And Reddit was number one with the overlap of audience. So I thought, oh my gosh, why am I not sourcing on Reddit because of this? And, I had also been a Redditor myself for over a decade. And I was like, there really is a community for everything. Like, if there's a community called Bread Stapled to Trees, which is quite literally a very active community of people stapling bread to trees, then of course there's a JavaScript community. Of course there's a React JS community. So I started going there to look for developers, and I found that it's a place where developers really tend to thrive. It's not like a typical social media site where people are taking selfies for likes and clout and stuff like that. It's got the premise of anonymity, which you get a lot more text-based discussion where people aren't there to get followers. They're on that platform to discuss what they're passionate about. And there's a unique level of engagement among Redditors. So that's why I found so many great communities specifically for developers. Like specifically the React JS subreddit is probably one of the best moderated ones that I've found. And it's one that's friendly to recruiters as long as you follow the rules. They do have mega threads monthly for recruiting for developers. They even have mega threads for who's available at the time. And I just put the link to that in the chat. But it gives you a template for how to post your jobs up there. And I would say, honestly, the vast majority of React developers I have found on Reddit, and they've responded to the ads that I've posted there. So really a great community. And then also Discord. So it's a very similar method that you have to employ on Discord. And that's sort of becoming part of the community, offering something up, even if you're not a developer, whether that's resources to help them find their next job without immediately asking for anything in return. A lot of people are very appreciative of a free resume review. Or insights into which companies are hiring, or where the good opportunities are. So there's still value that you can present as a recruiter, but my best advice is when you go into more closed off communities like this is to give more than you take. So that's really the best advice that I can give. I recently discovered a really cool platform that actually indexes Discord servers that you don't need an invite to join, and it's called Disboard. There's quite a few in there for development communities, so I definitely recommend that you take a look at that. So I would say that just in general, forums are a great place that are a little bit more unconventional to look for developers. And we've listed quite a lot of those in our toolbox that we gave in that QR code. because there's a whole world outside of GitHub and Stack Overflow. Those are great communities, and you should definitely grab the low-hanging fruit to go to those. But there's a whole lot more than that out there.
One other areas that people don't think about is meetup.com. Regardless of where you live, there's tons of meetup groups where people that are experienced practitioners of a certain language or whatever it is that you're trying to do come and talk and educate each other. And you have people that are new that attend. And if you wanted to learn how to code, which there are some recruiters and sourcers that do take the time to do that, and I do think it will be to your advantage to do so, will allow you to join, and then you can code and then kind of discreetly have conversations with folks and then let them know, hey, yeah, I'm a recruiter at so-and-so. And then they can approach you, or you can talk about the jobs that you have. Again, but you always got to respect the rules of the group that are established. And then the other thing I would say is conferences are a fantastic gold mine to go after, especially when you're trying to target diverse candidates or diversity, equity, and inclusion folks. So I know Anita Borg is a fantastic conference for that. And I've attended it in person and would recommend you explore it.
And so many of these conferences are actually free now, especially ones that are offered online. I know that Greg Hawkes mentioned that he attends quite a few of them to get some great networking in with those that are attending conferences. And really, it speaks to the level of the quality of the candidate that is, going outside of their job to get better at it and attending conferences to learn more. So I would definitely highly recommend that as well.
Yeah, that's something that I've appreciated as well. Two aspects of that: actually being able to source and get conference lists of attendees, but then specifically if you're working on maybe something that's more leadership focused or managerial in nature, like a engineering manager. Oftentimes, a lot of the presenters that are publicly listed might index more towards those roles, which are helpful. Even if you are recruiting for something highly technical, even being able to tap into that thought leaders community, understanding, wow, they're working on this at X, Y, and Z company, can lead you to people who are maybe kind of adjacent to that, and they know, which is pretty cool.
Perfect. I'm kind of working my way through the Q&A here a little bit too as well. So I'm going to take a quick break to do that here. So yeah, Kristen, you had said you missed the QR code. We're going to send that out again at the end. So you'll definitely see it when it pops up. Just snag it with your phone real quick, open it, bookmark it, do something like that. Back to the Q&A. Thank you, David, for keeping up with things in there. That's been great. Yeah, like David said to Laura, if you're learning to learn new things, the handout we're going to be giving you gives you a bunch of entry-level beginner knowledge of how to learn these things. So that's going to be a really big help. For the person who asked about Reddit, I know somebody in there asked, how do you start if you've never really sourced on Reddit before? Use Boolean to find everything Erin Mathew has ever said on Reddit on Google. That's my exact answer, is type in those two things together. I'm sure she has done it on full webinars, mini webinars, blogs, and everything like that. And then, of course, follow Erin on LinkedIn. That's going to be a great place as well.
Yeah, and I have a toolbox I can drop here in the chat. So this is the comprehensive list of the Google spreadsheet that I maintain with most of the high-profile communities for each specific, industry to recruit in. But then also I have a condensed bookmark page that I can put in here as well that's specifically for tech. And I outline the communities where it is safe to recruit on with notes, saying okay, be careful of how you do it on there, but yes, you can. So hopefully those resources get you started there. But my biggest piece of advice that I always tell everybody is be a Redditor first and a recruiter second. I would not even recommend going on Reddit and recruiting today. Start an account if you don't already have one. Join some subjects that are of interest to you, engage and participate, and then maybe 2-3 months later, then go start on Reddit, because they're going to look at your profile and be like, oh, this dude just created his account yesterday. I don't want nothing to do with this. Redditors are inherently suspicious of anybody that's not already part of the community. I can tell you one thing, they really hate when BuzzFeed goes on there to try and get the Redditors to write their content for them. And it backfires fabulously sometimes, but that's a whole other story. So I would say proceed with caution, but if you do it right, you can get some really fantastic candidates.
I believe it was Reggie who brought up meetups. Yeah, meetups and Reddit are... David? Oh, sorry, David. I like the Brady Bunch conversation we're having here. So David brought up Meetup. Erin brought up Reddit. Those are both the same kind of rules. We're like, don't go to a meetup and just start recruiting people. Go there to learn for a couple months. Ask, eventually if they know of people who are looking, and try to get in the door that way. Otherwise, you're going to get like kicked off Meetup and Reddit completely if you're doing it that way. So slow and steady. So next question here, we kind of talked about, finding people on Reddit, finding people on Meetup. You find them, how do you get in touch with them? So that's the biggest thing is, it looks like David might have dropped off for a sec, but Reggie, we'll start off with you on this one here. Can you share some kind of strategies you've used for reaching out to developers and engineers, particularly those who may not be looking for a new job? And I'll just say, we all know this. Tech people, more than any other career, are getting tens, if not hundreds of messages from recruiters a week. So you have to be the one to stand out. You have to have the best subject line. You have to text them or whatever, however you get through. So starting off with Reggie, how do you get in touch with, the hard to find passive candidates in tech?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think there's two fundamental approaches I take to this. It either needs to be in the bucket of highly customized and tailored to them, right? Like unique customization towards that candidate, or, and not that these are mutually exclusive, or it needs to be highly focused towards the actual work they're going to be doing, right? I'm reaching out to this person because I know this has been their career trajectory, and this role is in alignment with that. And so, probably speaking, they're going to be interested in continuing to develop along that skill set. There has to be specialization or a focus in one or the other, right? Sometimes you don't know what someone's really interested in. Maybe it's more of a ghost profile where there's not a ton of information on them. And just based on some of the context clues, right? The signal you're seeing from their profile could be, past places they've worked that, have impressive engineering teams. It could be potentially where they went to school, or maybe they work with other great engineers. You have some positive signal points. And so maybe being able to use some of those clues to, have more of a unique specialized reach out are going to be important. But you want to avoid anything that comes off as, did he just send this to 15 different people? If he replaced my name, would it have made just as much sense? And so those are some of the, I guess, first things I think about.
Yeah. And it really does depend on the role sometimes too. There's definitely been situations where the talent pool has been so limited for either the type of tech that they work in or the niche that they're in, that where I'm like, this is going to have to be highly specialized outreach that I use. There's a really fun story that I like to tell about a candidate that I sourced when I was working at Maxar Technologies, and we had to find flight software engineers, and the pool of talent for those people, I mean, for one, they've got to have a clearance. They've got to have experience specifically with flight software. And it's a very, very narrow pool. So I came across a profile of one person that's listed in his LinkedIn profile that one of his biggest interests were Twizzlers. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. So I sent him an email with the subject line, sign-on bonus 5 pounds of Twizzlers. And of course, he responded to me immediately. So, we got him through the process. We got him an offer, and he did end up actually working for us. And I scheduled to have delivered on his first day 5 pounds of Twizzlers to his house. And I, of course, used my sourcing skills to find his address. But that was one of the more memorable hires that I made. And, you know, if you're really in a pinch for a difficult role, going the extra mile like that, obviously we can't do that for 100 candidates, right? But sometimes when you're in those situations where push comes to shove, getting that hyper personalization is really what will make the difference in the end.
No, that's great. What was I going to say off of that? That Twizzler story is great. And finding their address, that's a very common thing that sourcers do, where, you know, that's awesome. That should be a commercial for Twizzlers. I think that would be pretty good. That'd be good. What'd you say?
I said I'm more partial to Australian licorice, but that's okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I didn't even know that was like its own category. Interesting.
Oh, yes, it's delicious. It comes in all kinds of flavors like green apple, blue raspberry, strawberry. I digress.
Interesting. I like that. So kind of, Reggie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think there's definitely a bit of an art in finding your voice, having some humor and personality without going overboard. I'm curious, do any of you guys have any stories of, you know, maybe humor gone wrong, what you've seen from recruiters or even things that you've experienced?
Yes, I did have an experience go wrong one time. Let me just say this, like I started doing really funny subject lines when I was in the cleared space, which I would say about 95% of people thought it was hilarious and they responded and engaged with me. Like one of my favorite subject lines was Pop-Tarts are ravioli, change my mind. And people would respond back with elaborate arguments about why that is or isn't true. But I had one guy, and I had my cell number in my email signature. Instead of responding back, within 5 minutes of me sending that email, he calls me and starts berating me over the phone, saying like, why would you send such a ridiculous email like that? He goes, if you call yourself a senior sourcer, then you better start working on your craft to make sure that you're actually at that level. And I'm like, okay. All right. Thank you. And then, you know, come to find out there was a whole lot more going on with that candidate. And I guess he'd been rejected from a bunch of jobs at our company, but that's beside the fact. But anyways, 95% of the people did enjoy that subject line, for the record.
That's a good percentage.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, the biggest thing I'll say is, you know, when you start out in recruiting, they always give you the worst piece of advice, which is always like, okay, look at the college the person went to and then see if you can relate to it. Where it's like, hey, Erin, I see you went to Texas State. I watched Friday Night Lights in high school. Do you want to talk about it back in engineer job, where it's like so obvious? At that point, just send a blanketed template, because people would rather have that than like that kind of thing. So that's a big thing, is like, make sure it works, make sure it's connected. And there are some things I think we also put in our resources that are for testing out templates, testing out subject lines and things like that.
It was sendcheckit.com. It's a fantastic resource. It's been pretty accurate in actually figuring out if candidates are likely to respond to it. And it gives you a lot of tips with your subject line about how to improve the score of it as well. So definitely recommend that you try that out. So once again, that's sendcheckit.com, and it is in our technical resource page.
Perfect. And David, I'm sure you probably answered this in the Q&A, but do you have any good subject lines that you've used that were successful?
Yeah, I think, like Erin said, you got to find like research and use something that is of interest to the candidate. You know, some people have hobbies, or they're into sports, or they're a Star Wars fan or Star Trek fan. Using like little catchy phrases that are associated with that, I think is a good way to do it. Sometimes putting like an emojis works. But I think that what I would say with subject lines is to make them personalized and be direct. Don't be too wordy, because it may not be viewed entirely. And I think it's last stat I heard was like over 60% of messages now are consumed through smartphones or through your cell phone. So make sure that you are not having too long of a message in your body, and also don't include more than one link, because that will also increase your chances of ending up in a spam folder. So, and that's what you don't want.
Yeah, and actually, David, the subject line tester that we have in the toolbox, it does actually give you a preview of how your subject line is going to look on a mobile phone. So that definitely is a part of it. But I think, yeah, the subject lines are a great idea, especially if you can personalize them. However, we all know the reality of, a lot of times we have to recruit high volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's still ways to get people's attention without being hyper personalized. I personally took a few coding classes myself. I still take a few occasionally just so I understand certain programming languages, but it's not for the reason that you think. It's so I understand it just well enough to write subject lines in code for whatever they're going to be working with. And that immediately catches their attention anytime I send something like that.
Oh,
and
cool.
I had, and indeed, I had a former colleague that would write their message in code entirely in the code of the engineer that they were trying to target, and they had some tremendous success with that.
I came across somebody on LinkedIn years ago when I was doing tech, and they were like, solve this code, and if you can get it, put it in the subject line of the outreach to me. And I could not get it. But no, those are great points. I mean, what I would definitely say too, what David said, make it short and sweet, see what it looks like on mobile. Try not to make it too scrollable. That's a big thing too. People are going to be checking this in the checkout line when they're getting into bed, on their lunch breaks. Don't make it too scrollable. And also another big thing is, try sending it to your coworker. For me, I have a couple different emails. So I'll send an email to myself in one of my other emails. I'll see what it looks like in Gmail and Hotmail, on my phone, on an iPad. Like, do that, send it to your colleagues and be like, would you respond to this? That's a big thing too. And don't be embarrassed, help each other out. And, that's a big thing too. People don't often share, hey, what subject lines have you been using? Recruiting's not the competition that some people think it is. Ask what your colleagues are doing, get their advice from what they've found successful, and it's okay to use the same things.
Yeah. Two other things I wanted to add real quick. As much time as we spend, trying to figure out the perfect reach out, how many people, by just sending a quick follow-up, actually respond, right? Nothing elaborate whatsoever. And so just having some sort of discipline, habit, and system around your iteration of reach outs, how many reach outs you're going to do. And, if you have access to something that allows you to do campaigns, that's huge. And then the other part of it is, don't be afraid to, we're talking about different techniques and styles. Don't be afraid to explore and A/B test what works for you. Get your own data, right? And have an idea of what you find works.
Yeah, no, those are great points there. I mean, that's what it's all about is the A/B test. And also another thing too, talking about the follow-ups, is I think it was proven recently that people usually, like 70% of people don't follow up till the 4th or 5th email. So that's like a big thing that I would say is like, keep following up. And, you always want to hit numbers with sourcing. I sourced 50 people today. I sourced 30 people to whatever it is, depending on your X. Take a Friday to just do follow-ups. Because even though you might have not reached out to anybody new, you're going to get a couple good responses from that to be able to get into the door.
And also using a multi-sequence email, in-mail, text message is a good best practice. And also sometimes when you find a place like Erin mentioned, Reddit, right? You may find a forum or some sort of place that the engineers that you're trying to recruit from, congregate to talk shop, so to speak. And sometimes using those channels might be the best approach to reach out to them.
It might be, but I always give a caveat with Reddit because once again, the platform is founded on the idea of anonymity, right? There's times where you'll look into someone's user profile and you're like, oh, they're a Java developer. Oh, but also they posted some really embarrassing stuff about themselves on these other forums. So that's my hesitation sometimes reaching out to them on Reddit. So if at all possible, I treat it like a hackathon and I see where I can find this user elsewhere online and say, oh no, I found you on LinkedIn actually. Mostly because I don't want to, I guess, make them uncomfortable and be like, oh my gosh, they read my deep, dark thoughts that I posted on Reddit. But if I do end up reaching out on Reddit, I would do it with my personal Reddit account. Because in that situation, I feel like it levels the playing field. You know, I can, they can say like, okay, yeah, they've read all of my posts. Wait, but I can see all of hers. I know all of the trashy reality shows that she watches now. And, you know, I know that this is, you know, this is what she does on the weekends and stuff. So that's the reason that I use my personal Reddit account also for recruiting. So.
Yeah. The biggest thing is there's no proven thing to any demographic. People go, oh, Gen, whatever, the younger generation than I am, that generation loves text messages, and the older generation loves this. Like, every person's different. So sometimes you have to send an email, then a LinkedIn connection, then a text. Another big thing I recommend to anybody, anytime you send somebody a LinkedIn email, request to connect with them. Because the next day when you come in, you'll have their email, they'll have looked at your profile. There'll be a better way of getting a response that way.
But don't have too wordy of messages again, because otherwise you're going to get too long, didn't read.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Philosophically, what do you believe is too much messaging? Like, would you send an email to someone, text message them, and, you know, message them on LinkedIn the same day? I'm just curious what schools of thought are.
No, I mean, I would probably do one and then a few days later do another. It depends on the same way. Like, you're not going to send your outreach message 1 and outreach message 2, 3, and 4 on the same day. So you would just space it out over whatever cadence you thought makes sense. And again, it's you got to A/B test it. What works today for this type of role may not work tomorrow. So
I'm a big believer of, hey, I've tried to reach you on your email a couple times. Just thought I'd shoot over a text and follow up. And then you'll usually get back, oh, Mikey, that's an older email. I haven't used that in years. Like, thank you for following up. Let's get in the door this way. And I would say, if anybody's ever applied for any role at your company and you come across them and see them in your ATS, a text can be pretty okay, in my opinion. And there's some great free texting apps where you don't have to do it through your own cell phone. They're not going to call you. There's plenty of different things to do with that as well. Moving on to the next one here. I think we'll probably get maybe 2 or 3 more in and then open it up to like all out audience in the end. Diversity and inclusion, such a big thing that we are focusing on these days, not only in tech, but every company, every kind of recruiting. We know, of course, there's, ways to look at the HBCUs. There are tons of pre-built Boolean strings already for networking groups and meetup groups and all of that to connect with people. A lot of that is also in the start.me that we're going to share at the end. The whole entire thing for diversity in tech. But I would just ask, you guys, how can companies do it the right way? And how do you kind of track your metrics? How do you kind of know that you're doing it successfully?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Erin.
Okay. So when it comes to actually sourcing for candidates from diverse backgrounds, it is all about being intentional. So I admittedly made a lot of mistakes when trying to make sure that I was sourcing enough candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. And I made the naive assumption that because places like GitHub and Stack Overflow and DevTO are considered open source, that must mean that they're diverse, right? I was painfully wrong. I actually looked closer into a lot of the platforms where we typically source for candidates. And when you look at the demographic makeups for places like Stack Overflow and GitHub, their diversity indexes are actually worse than the tech industry itself. 95% of users on GitHub are male, and 75% of those that responded to the survey were white. So if you're only relying on a certain resource like GitHub to find developers, chances are you are limiting your ability to find candidates from diverse backgrounds. So I actually looked further into other platforms outside of even just coding platforms. And the difference between the demographics of platforms is pretty staggering. You look at places like Pinterest, and it's actually 78% female on the platform. And this is just gender diversity that we're talking about here. Now, just because a place like GitHub is 95% male doesn't mean that you shouldn't source there. It just means that it is that much more important that you are intentional about how you source there. So I think that a big part of this is starting with a consciousness and an understanding of where you're looking, and constantly doing that research to unlearn certain biases that you have as well. And I think that not enough people take the time to do that. And a lot of people also don't go beyond the obvious places to look for candidates of diverse backgrounds. Should we source from HBCUs or historically, Hispanic institutions? Absolutely. You absolutely should. But you also have to understand that no matter what your strategy is, it's always going to leave someone out. There are a lot of wonderful people in tech that did not attend HBCUs that you could be missing out on. You have to diversify your sourcing strategy just as much. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that if you want to be able to hire diverse candidates, you should make it a goal that you have to make sure that you have at least an individual from each of the different groups that you have, if not more, that you're trying to improve upon if you have that information at your company. If not, just be intentional. Try different things, A/B test it, see what works. And there's also a lot of professional associations out there that will give you, that you can partner with, that can help your company, build upon and grow your abilities in that space. Also, leveraging your employee business resource groups or employee resource groups, they might be called, and partnering with the leaders there, because a lot of times they may be aware of, if you partner with your veteran ESG, maybe they know of a certain place that those people that are in the type of role congregate, then they, might be a good place to partner with. The other thing I would say is using hashtags in your searches is a great way to identify people from the different groups and conferences that you're targeting. Also, using pronouns and natural language search in your Boolean search will help you identify folks that are in those areas, and realize that some companies have a very rigid profile that they have to come from a top 10 school and all this other stuff. And you got to realize that not everybody's going to have had the opportunities that others have had. So you may be, while you're not intentionally doing it, may have adverse impacts by just using the same profile over and over, because then you're going to get the same results, right? It's like insanity, the definition of insanity. So like Erin said, you have to have a diversified approach, sourcing strategy that you're executing on for your outreach messaging and so forth.
The one thing I'll add there is, the smaller the understanding is of what the role is, what the business is trying to accomplish, all of those variables, right? The more we rely on, these 3 keywords, top 25 CS programs, it totally closes the aperture in being able to think outside the box to actually figure out, does this person, maybe not coming from a traditional background, have the opportunity to be successful here just because our understanding is a bit more narrow? And so it's almost like one of the best ways to find diverse talent is to have great foundational recruiting fundamentals, and having a great starting point with qualified positions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one thing that I always want to tell the sourcing community is that your impact on the world of technology as a sourcer it's much more impactful than you might realize. When we have technologies that are built by homogenous populations, there are real life consequences to that. We look at the rise of AI and things like facial recognition technology, algorithms with their own biases that are coded by people with their own biases are deciding who gets mortgages, who gets into colleges, unfortunately, there are police departments that are using facial recognition technologies where the data sets are not well versed in a variety of skin colors. And it oftentimes is they misidentify people. So you as a sourcer, with your impact on building out tech teams, you have to be intentional about sourcing candidates from a diverse number of backgrounds. Because the impact is greater than you think.
Thank you. Yeah, all of this. I know this is the biggest thing that everybody's struggling with their companies, diversity sourcing. So this could definitely be its own breakout thing, and has been in plenty of webinars. But yeah, I think
you have to be intentional with whatever you do, and don't think you're going to solve the problem overnight. It's
right.
There's a long road game here, but you can have some small, quick victories if you reach out to folks internally, and just make sure that you're interviewing panels and hiring managers are representative of the folks that you're interviewing. So that way so people can see more about your company, and can ask people questions that will give them the comfort that they might be looking for.
Perfect. Some things I'll just say very basic. There are some great sourcing websites out there where you can select a box to narrow down your search to diversity, which is great. And there's also the strings, which you don't need to build. You don't need to Google every historically Black college and university. You can literally just Boolean diversity strings, and you will find a couple great websites with long strings of sororities, fraternities, and everything. So when it comes to building new Boolean, I think the biggest things I would say is there's the Bool Chrome extension, builds Boolean strings for you. Hire EZ, I think the free one builds you 1 or 2 a day. And that is it called Scoparec? I shared it the other day on LinkedIn, and I'm like, I don't even know how to say it, but that's a great one. I always find my way back there when Googling strings. They just have the largest collection of all time of Boolean, which is great. I'm going to ask one more here. It looks like David's keeping up with the Q&A, so I'm just going to kind of ask another question here. I don't know why all my stats are all 70% for some reason. Every stat I've given is 70% today. But I remember learning 70% of hires at companies are referrals. This, of course, depends on your industry and company and all that good stuff. However, in tech, do you see referrals being a big thing, whether it's internal networks, somebody gets back to you and says, I'm not interested, and you say, who do you know? Or share this link with them. How have you all seen referrals in the tech industry, and how have you leveraged them to, get more hires?
I think referrals are probably one of the most reliable sources to get top quality candidates from, because a lot of times it's people that worked with other people in previous organizations, and if somebody works in your environment, they're going to know, and they're a good person that you want to if you could hire multiple of that person, you would want to clone. They know other good people, and it's a good way to make sure you're getting high quality candidates into your process. The other thing I would say is a lot of times you'll have some really strong candidates that will interview for a position, but you can only hire one person for the role, but you may have interviewed 5 really strong candidates. So I would say that another great strategy is to go after, your silver medalists, so to speak, people that came second or runner up to the person that got selected for the role, and make sure you have them on a hot list. So that way, when those future roles come up, they're the first people you reach out to. And the other thing I would say is boomerang employees. So people that worked at the company before, but maybe left for a different reason and, might have an interest in coming back. Those are some things I would say to do.
Find a way to tag your silver medalists. And if your system, your CRM and ATS don't let you do it, make it as manual as you need to, unfortunately. Put it in Excel doc, put it on your phone. Silver medalists are the best way to go. When a rec closes, move the other people into a pipeline. That's such a big thing. Just find a way to keep track of them.
One of my biggest things with referrals is I find, especially with engineers for some reason, oftentimes they're very hesitant to refer people. And so what's helped for me is doing their thinking for them, almost talent mapping their career, going through where they've worked, understanding the team they were on, and asking them almost point blank questions about, tell me about your experience at this company, you're at this team, who else was on that team? And then asking questions about these people that I know exist, as opposed to, I actually don't know anyone, even though I've been in the industry for, 13 years or whatever the situation is. That's been helpful for me. And, having some open-ended questions, who was even going back to diversity, who was the best female engineer you worked with, who was the best, or whatever the category is. One of the other things that tends to be helpful as well is sometimes getting referrals for the same kind of role. I feel like there can be some resistance, but that this person worked in probably a similar ecosystem where, maybe if I'm talking to an engineer, I can get a great product referral, right? They worked as a product manager, they had an engineering leader, so on and so forth. And so almost looking at it as talent mapping through their entire resume and coming to the table with that information already prepared and, working from there.
Get referrals off of resumes. If you're working on a software engineer and a software engineer manager, when your software engineer applies and lists their references of their software managers, then get their email, phone number, and then start sourcing them too. 2 birds, 1 stone kind of thing. Cool. There we go. Perfect.
Are we? I think we're nearing the end of the presentation. I knew this was going to be a good conversation. I really had no doubts, but this has exceeded my expectations by far. What a great conversation. So many good takeaways, so much knowledge, so much insight. Mikey, thank you so much for leading this presentation. I love it when I can bring in moderators from outside. David, Reginald, Erin, thank you so much for being here. You all have always been such great community members of our community, and so I appreciate the level in which you give back. Huge thank you to CoderPad for making today's webinar possible. Without their continued support, we wouldn't be able to put on great content like this. To everybody out there in the audience, thanks for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. I'm going to share that QR code one more time. And if anybody out there in webinar land would like to get involved with our programming, either at our conferences or on these webinars, please reach out. We're always looking for new faces and new insights to add to our programming. And if you have suggestions for topics, but maybe are a little camera shy, that's okay too. Let us know what things you'd like us to cover.
And don't feel that you have to be like, have tons of experience to be able to present. There's a lot of people that are very competent and have a lot to share, and other people will resonate with your story and your style. So like Josh said, don't be shy and come forward and share your knowledge.
100%. There's people in this industry that have been around for 20 years. There's people in this industry that have been around for 20 minutes. And the person with 20 minutes has more experience than the person that has 5 minutes. So you'd be surprised how much you know. And there's probably really good insight that you can share. Without any further ado, that's a wrap. It looks like we can gift you 1 minute back to your day before your next call or whatever you have going on. But thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next time.